This is an opportunity to let you know how much you can do with your systems or what you should be doing to upgrade your systems to take full advantage. And now back to Ilya.
Thank you very much, David, and thanks for the kind intro. And it's great to be back with everyone. Thank you to everyone who's donating their time today. We understand you have very busy lives and lots of things to do, so we're grateful that you are serving the community and trying to bring useful information back to your congregations, back to your organizations. We'll cover video analytics. Before I get into this, as you know, we have our standard disclaimer. Obviously, as much as we monitor and as much as we spend time collaborating and working with government agencies and looking at security grants and what's covered, what's not covered, and also collect information from various private sources, we may miss some things. We may not be exactly on point. We ask for you to be patient with us. Information that we share is based on our best exposure to whatever's out there. As you know, both in the government sector and in the private sector, things do tend to change sometimes. So if there are changes, obviously, if it's something material, we'll report on it later on. Without further ado, David asked a very pertinent question, and I think that it's a good starting point. It's useful to understand the difference between what traditional video surveillance is and what video analytics does. And I'll give you some examples, some visuals, of course. But most importantly, video surveillance is, those are our eyes on our perimeters, inside our buildings, along our territories, our sites, our outdoor spaces, and also inside our facilities to monitor and record activity. And where the line is between analytics and traditional video surveillance is that analytics is interactive. It understands something without human interference because of algorithms, and it produces signal back to us, the users. And it says, look, there's something that you should pay attention to. And so that's something that we have to react to and respond, right? In other ways, it has various other features like abandoned objects, all sorts of motion around property and inside the building. So think about traditional video surveillance where you would be the active user and the system will give you information only when you engage with it. And analytics is the ability of the system to be smart on its own and to give you feedback based on various parameters that you calibrate. We all know, hope we do by now, because we've been talking about video surveillance in past webinars, that traditional video surveillance could be seen as passive and primarily retroactive, meaning that we wait till an incident occurs or some unusual situation. And then, as they used to say in the past, we go to tape and we see what happened via the signal that the video cameras sent to us, right? We also know that, unfortunately, as much as we place faith in video surveillance because it's technology and it's supposed to serve us, we sometimes are not very good stewards of this technology. And so the monitoring, if we even consider for those systems to be relatively well monitored, is also inconsistent. And so sometimes you might rely on security personnel or people simply designated to observe the video signal, but that also doesn't happen consistently and frequently. And so what we find in a lot of facilities is they're saturated with video cameras, but unfortunately, there's very little monitoring, if any, that goes on until something unusual or negative happens. Another challenge that we look at when we engage with the community and when we help members of the community, the organizations, to implement enhancements, particularly video surveillance, is that the video surveillance systems, as much as in normal commercial operations, they are very tightly integrated with access control, with alarm systems, and so on. in various facilities across our community, your community, these systems tend to be standalone. So they don't necessarily interact logically, digitally with access control, video intercoms, and your alarm systems and various other electronics. I can only say that this is something that we pick up every time we engage with the community, and we try to, as much as possible, to advise community members that it's best for these systems to be integrated, but the challenge remains. Last but not least, and I've talked about it multiple times, these systems unfortunately also happen to be sometimes in poor maintenance. Therefore, even though the systems might be new, they may not have been calibrated right. The focus is not ideal. The cabling is exposed. There are all sorts of disconnects between the camera that's supposed to send a signal to the monitor, but you won't be able to see much or anything. And so the maintenance of these systems is also a challenge, across the community and projects that we get involved in. So as much as possible, we try to highlight these items about traditional video surveillance to the community, because here's the kicker. If we cannot manage these traditional video surveillance challenges, then it's going to be even more difficult to manage video analytics. Even though it's interactive, we first have to make sure that our traditional video surveillance systems are set up properly, that they're very well maintained, that they can be monitored, and then video analytics becomes a lot more important and useful. So I'll run through a few things, through a few key features of video analytics, and then we'll talk about the use cases. Please, for David and the rest of the CSI team, please pitch in with your stories, with your observations. It's very useful because I cannot claim that I see the entirety of our community, although I do a lot of site visits and engagement with various organizations, but we all have our limitations, if you will. So when we work as a team, we can certainly be a lot more useful with more examples. Here you see something that is deployed and has been deployed for years in various organizations to a certain extent. This is the use of motion detection and virtual fences. You can see in this photo that there is a fence that exists. Potentially that fence may not be in good shape. Maybe a panel or two are missing and so on. So the site is struggling with the physical barrier. So to compensate, they're using motion detection features and the virtual fencing. So you can designate through a video analytics a zone that's marked in red here and with the red boundary that picks up motion and can send an alarm. So in a sense, it's a glorified alarm system. It's a useful feature. However, Dov and I had side conversations about it. Nothing is perfect. And so these systems also tend to have some false alarms. For example, instead of a human, it may pick up an animal, send alarms to that effect. So the key here is how the system is calibrated and tested. The more I engage with the community, the more I try to bring this point to everybody's awareness that, look, if somebody just says, I can install this system out of the box, it's going to be working exactly to meet your needs, I doubt that's the case. It really requires engagement and collaboration from the organizations, from the community members who are looking after these types of projects to make sure that they understand what scenarios they're dealing with, what are they anticipating, and how they want the system to be calibrated. Another feature of video analytics is person and object detection. There's a relevant point I'll make in the next couple of slides, but here again, it's, if you think that this is a new feature, these have been around for quite some time. They do leverage either existing or specially set up video surveillance systems, and those systems can identify pedestrian movement around certain properties, And they can also identify objects, be it objects in motion, like a bicycle in the upper left portion of this photo, or a handbag in the couple of examples here in the middle of the photo and on the right. Yes, these systems provide these types of features. They're useful in certain settings, but again, everything depends on the quality of calibration and the scenarios that you are trying to address together with the integrator. And here's where we get to issues of more specific security challenges that some organizations have, where scenarios could be specifically inclusive of objects that are abandoned or left behind. Systems that deliver video analytics, they rely on newer existing video surveillance cameras to identify these types of objects to alert the users to these situations. I'm more concerned about the type of response and how those alerts are received than I am concerned about the quality of how these alerts are generated. Video surveillance is very sophisticated. The quality of lenses is very good. And even some of the cheaper cameras on the market can help produce this type of signal if the software that they're operating with is well designed. But please remember that as much as we embrace this type of technology, the challenges in the actions that you would take should you receive these types of alerts, and who's going to be designated to respond to these types of incidents. A very popular feature recently, there are several manufacturers that offer it, is weapons detection. And so instead of using magnetometers or X-ray machines and various other sensory technologies, video surveillance is now being used to discern a weapon. Many of these systems are pitched as though they are artificial intelligence driven. I dare say that's not true, but there are some analytics behind it for sure. The systems are trained on all sorts of weapon types, but there's a long road ahead of these companies to actually have artificial intelligence in play for detection. However, several manufacturers have been successful in penetrating the markets, especially around school districts and other types of organizations, which have experienced recent increases in gun violence. And so, again, a signal is sent, but the question is, who receives it? How is it being processed? What's the type of response?
And, one of the things you should be thinking about is once a weapon is in your building, it's too late. You should be in lockdown. That's the only thing that you can do is either run, hide, or fight. And, the idea of spending money on this is probably superfluous, to say the least. And there are a bunch of systems that really feature the idea that they can detect shots fired. Again, shots fired is too late. So the idea of keeping bad guys and girls out is what you should be focusing on.
There's great statistic, David. Thank you very much for bringing that in and reminding me to share this. There's a great statistics by a gentleman named David Reedman, who runs one of the most extensive school shooting databases in the US. Interestingly, after having analyzed all sorts of incidents across the US, his calculations are that 70% of those incidents and shootings happen outside of the building. And yet, when I was presenting to a school as recently as yesterday evening, all of this was news to them because they do expect the scenario to unfold just like on this photo. But that's actually only 30% of cases. And David is absolutely right. And I tried to demonstrate it to multiple clients before. Once a weapon is introduced inside your facility, it is probably going to cause some trauma at the very least, if not multiple injuries well beyond that. So please remember that our message is always to be proactive as much as possible and to facilitate detection where it can afford greater distances between the threat actor and the potential targets. To move on, another feature that we see more often in the last couple of years is facial recognition. Once again, we are plugged in with a very good research organization called IPVM. They have multiple reports of citing and finding challenges in terms of how various facial recognition systems operate in terms of accuracy of detection. And in various cases, when tested in near live conditions, these systems also produce multiple false alarms. And one key point that these systems also seem to offer is matching somebody's face to a potential list of either unwanted persons that the organization has in-house, or matching it to lists of all sorts of offenders that are public. So yes, there are some benefits to these things. However, we still do not see great consistency beyond very limited applications. So if you are entertaining these types of solutions, please remember that all of this has to be carefully tested and calibrated based on specific scenarios to your organization, okay? However, the more I engage with the community, the more I see that it's challenging to implement facial recognition for access control and for all types of screening, simply because of the throughput that's required, even though, yes, you can pick up a moving human being, and if the video surveillance is sufficient enough to recognize their face, and it will then check against a certain database, but the throughput in various facilities in our community is quite high, especially around large events. Another limitation is that this feature may not necessarily be allowed to be used during Shabbos and during other religious activities. So carefully consider what it is that you're acquiring and understand the scenarios for use before you spend money on these types of systems.
And the other point, related point to that, is that a NSGP grant will not pay for a facial recognition system. That doesn't really make a big difference, but in the past, that has consistently been something that is not permitted, is facial recognition, and we're going to get to license plate readers.
These two, so facial recognition, I'll just jump to the next slide, license plate reading, are typically sold as either premium modules to your general video analytics system or a video surveillance system. There are many manufacturers that do this. Both systems, when set up properly for different scenarios, they actually do perform. The trouble is with the grant coverage, as David just pointed out, and that these tend to be standalone premium features of different product models. License plate recognition, I have heard community members voice interest in these systems. Certainly point that should be further evaluated for a specific organization, but let me remind you. So David and I, Dov and I, or individually, we visit a lot of facilities. And just test yourself for a second. Walk into your security closet and check if it has air conditioning. And test yourself and see if your security closet, where your security equipment is, if it is even a closet and it's not somebody else's office or whatever, right? That it doesn't have a spaghetti of cables sticking out all over the place. If that's the state of your security system, you first have to fix that rather than buying more bells and whistles, okay? These systems are, let's call them sexy, but unfortunately, if you don't have your house in order as it is with the current set of systems, and some of the systems are dilapidated, they don't work as well, and there's not enough maintenance going on, what do you think will happen when you buy these bells and whistles? What's going to happen? Are they going to be properly deployed and used in the long run, or are they going to dilapidate as well in a short period of time? We unfortunately see inconsistency, to say the least, across different facilities when they continue to deploy different technologies.
On the other hand, by the way,
Mm.
These, for a license plate reader, just think of the kind of use synagogue during the week, where a limited number of people should be in the building. So the license plate reader could tell you that this is one of your regulars who's coming into the parking lot. But if it's not one of the regulars, it can send a notification. It's not just an alarm flashing, it can send a notification to your phone, including a clip of what's coming in. So someone can look and say, oh, well, that's not the rabbi, but that's the president of the synagogue who's not on the regular list. Or you could have the president on the regular list. That's the UPS truck, or you can have the UPS truck on the regular list. Those are the kinds of things. But what I just said, the regular list needs maintenance. You have to tell the system who you want to know. You don't need to know about a regular versus someone who is showing up. That person might have every legitimate reason. The rabbi could have an appointment with a minister, and that minister is fine, but that's an anomaly. You have to kind of think of all these systems as have the ability to detect anomalies because they're smart enough to know the regular operations. If you teach them, they're smart enough. If you don't teach them, they're dumb as a rock. So, if you're ready to do some of this work up front, it's incredibly helpful for your normal security operations.
That's a great point, David. And I would only add here that any member of the community that wishes to invest the time in reviewing these systems will probably do a decent job of figuring out the scenarios and how to properly set this up. Every member of the community, if they are willing to invest the time to monitor these and to respond to alerts from these systems, will probably do a decent job of it. The question is, who has the time? So think about who in your facilities is going to be responsible for looking after these systems, looking after these technologies, building out your response and action plans, right? Every new system requires a slight or significant reconfiguration of your policies and procedures, okay? So otherwise, you've invested the money into the bells and whistles, you haven't adjusted how you will interact with those bells and whistles, that could lead in and of itself to additional incidents.
So, human beings have learning curves and systems have learning curves, and they have to be melded together. But, at the same time, what we're comparing this to is I saw a building that had 120 cameras on their property, and our person was out there and said that there were 18 blind spots that should be covered. So they're going to have 138 cameras, but no one to watch them. So the question is thinking about what you want to see in every camera. It's something that's worthwhile. And then, asking your vendor, can we teach the system to find this anomaly?
So I'll move on to the next points. Now, as we demonstrated to you some of these key features of video analytics, and you can already see that we're not only thinking about tech, we're also discussing operations and being responsible for implementing this technology and using it, right? There are additional considerations that you should think about. Each such system will have its own pricing levels. Some of them are per camera licenses. Some of them are sold as bundles based on the number of cameras and what have you. I was dealing not so long ago with a fairly large organization. It's an education facility. And they were contemplating acquiring this weapons detection video analytics, only to realize that a lot of their existing cameras to which this video analytics system would be added are actually obsolete. they're not going to serve to the right level to facilitate the video analytics that the client was hoping for. And so remember, buying video analytics may also trigger changes to your existing video surveillance because you need to increase the quality of your cameras. So all of that will drive the pricing considerations. We already mentioned calibration, which is very important. Without calibration, David mentioned that the system will be dumb as a rock. It's not going to serve the purpose. The systems do produce false alarms. The worst thing you can do is to start ignoring those false alarms when they come through. There is a method of reducing false alarms, but if you do nothing and simply continue to ignore them, that desensitizes you as the user, and then you enter the realm of what we call security theater. You believe you have a security system, but it doesn't really provide any protection because you choose to ignore some of the alarms that it's sending through. Last but not least is, for this set of considerations, is response protocols. As I said before, and David, I think, mentioned as well, you deploy something new, your policies and procedures and protocols will need to be updated to embrace this new set of controls, right? So please remember, you're buying tech, you will have to change your operations in some way. Now, we'll go through, a couple of suggested use cases for your consideration. We're not suggesting that these are the only ones or that these will work for your specific conditions, but this is something that we feel could facilitate one very important point. First of all, as I said before, you do need to create as much distance as possible between the threat actor and the potential targets, meaning that the farther out your eyes and the ears are, your detection is, the better off you will be at making your decisions, because the closer the threat actor, the less capability you have at making decisions, because then your cognition gets affected by the incident and by the presence of the threat actor. These are the few things that you should consider. With proper setup, with proper testing, virtual fences actually help you extend your trigger points much farther out, away from your building, away from your pedestrian circulation areas, and so on. In some cases, if you have a site where you have a lot of outdoor spaces, virtual fences help control any movement past certain outer perimeters of your property to give you an alert that something is approaching, something has breached your perimeter. Now, again, I want to thank Dov for correcting me on this, because we both have, we do a lot of work in the field. I cannot claim that these systems work 100% of the time for 100% of applications. Okay, no practitioner should be telling you this. Okay, however, if your circumstances are a good fit for purpose, then yes, these systems will be effective for you. You just, again, to David's point, you need to look after it. You need to calibrate properly, and you also need to maintain it and make sure that the parameters you set are the ones that would work for you, for your scenarios.
And properly calibrated, these kind of systems can tell the difference most of the time between a deer or a
Yes,
wild turkey and a human being.
correct.
So that's one issue. The other kind of a virtual fence that we can be thinking about in a more urban setting is you have a wide sidewalk outside your building, and people are walking back and forth constantly, and you see that in your camera system, but you draw a virtual fence 24 inches from your building. So if someone comes up to your building within 24 inches, then you get a notification. So, generally people just pass by. There's stuff in front of the building. There are stairs, whatever. So they take the route of least resistance, which is away from your building. If anyone is deviating from that, should you get a notification, that's up to you to think about and talk to your vendor about.
Agreed. And please make sure this is also a very good test for discerning between good vendors and bad vendors. Bad vendor will not spend time with you to describe to you. They just want to sell. Okay, please remember that. A good vendor will be your advocate. That's the difference. That's how you can tell a good company from a bad company. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So yes, please.
Yeah, this might be a good time to talk about technical sales reps.
Ha. What do you want to know, David?
I bet the peanut gallery out there don't know anything about technical sales reps. So let's talk about what do technical sales reps do and what can they do for you?
There are two types of technical sales reps that I have encountered in my practice. One would be a person who knows very little about tech, but knows enough about the system that they're selling to go through its features, typically using a laptop or some sort of a trivial setup to demonstrate the capabilities. Any question about additional technical points, they will say, I don't know, I'll check with my engineer. That is the typical interaction. And then there are technical reps that have spent years and years designing systems in this industry. And it's a rare breed, but they're out there. And those folks will know everything there is to know about video surveillance, how it works, and they are extremely knowledgeable. And also, those are the types of folks that are very good advocates for the client to actually figure out what circumstances each particular client is facing, what scenarios might occur, and then design a solution that fits those purposes, those scenarios. So to your point, David, we have in New York a very, very busy market that is saturated with all sorts of technical reps, technical sales reps. The position that I typically suggest for the client to have is to get to a point with the technical rep where they have informed you about every single scenario that you're contemplating. It's best if you as a client write those scenarios down so you have some reference points, right? And you keep updating those scenarios that you can share with the next rep that comes over, and try to I'll say squeeze them for as much information as you can, even if they have to get an engineer on calls and so on, somebody who can speak more competently about the product, do so as much as possible. If you happen to have that rare breed where a technical sales rep actually knows what they're talking about and they can actually carry the entire conversation into technical situations, that's fantastic. You're dealing with someone who knows the system in and out and who can be respectful of how your organization operates and can design solutions on the spot during your conversation or within a very short period of time. David, did I cover what you asked or?
Yeah, you're the buyer here. So the idea, if someone isn't giving you enough answers, you can ask to, have someone get the answer for you. Because there's in the larger companies, there are people in most of these companies who know what they're doing. And the question is getting access to them.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And keep in mind, there's also a difference between manufacturer reps and integrator reps. Integrator rep is at the edge and they're trying to sell you, even though they might be very knowledgeable, but their thing is the sale. Manufacturers don't necessarily deal directly on the sales side with clients. And so their objective is to inform. So typically, you'll find a better conversation, more technically engaging conversation with the manufacturer's reps, even though they will have to sell you their product through a dealer. Those are the few distinctions. I want to just again point out that at any point when these things get complicated, that's what is one of the purposes for a CSI. Okay, please reach out to your regional security director. Okay, I cannot stress this enough. And look, they might be running out of bandwidth during the grant season. I completely respect that. However, if you reach out, very likely that you will get good guidance about how to deal with potential product acquisitions and who to speak with and how to go about getting as much information out of the sales rep as possible. So if you're struggling on your own, just don't hesitate and reach out to us at CSI. The next point here to think about is the abandoned object. I've deployed systems like this in addition to various other controls. You can be as finite as setting out the parameters for the size of the object. Today's systems can also discern between this particular suitcase, a rolling suitcase, and a backpack. Okay, they already have that training digitally, so the algorithms are already written to help the system discern without the user's interference. So there is a lot you can get from this. You just, again, same point like David mentioned before: calibration, case scenarios, talking to the sales rep, doing demonstrations, and so on and so forth. These systems will be very useful. Like, again, I refer to David's earlier point that you can set up certain points and areas around your facility where you want to monitor for left objects. Let's say you have a nursery school attached to your organization, right? And they occupy a certain space in your building. Would you want somebody to leave a backpack by the front door or by the windows of the classroom on the outside? Probably not a good idea, is it? Right? So you will want to watch out for these types of areas more so than others, or maybe when there are different types of services taking place for large groups of people, and let's say there is a pedestrian path towards the building, you might want to look out for left objects there. You might want to, again, be on the lookout closer to the perimeter of the building, especially if there are large windows, right? And inside buildings as well. The closer the object might be to a large gathering area inside, large gathering space, event hall, the more attention and the more alerts you want to get, right? It's much more difficult to deal with an abandoned object, especially if it's considered a threat inside the building than outside. In either case, luckily, these systems give you early warnings, so you can make your choices about how you're going to respond to that. Typically, it involves law enforcement, and any member of law enforcement will typically tell you, don't move the object, create a buffer zone, and so on and so forth. Hopefully, that's part of your planning. But to my earlier point, if you implement something like this, you have to have response protocols in place. Anything to add, David?
I think that, just so people know, NYPD has a system, well, a division or whatever it is, Jamie can tell me, called LMSI, Lower Manhattan Security Initiative. It is exactly what it says it is. In Lower Manhattan, it networks thousands of cameras that are attached to Genetec, which is a brand name's system, but they can only handle Genetec, although that's changing. And they pick up any unattended object on Wall Street. And then there's a standard response. That's the kind of thing that you want to know about, so that when there are unattended objects, what is your response? How do you proceed from there?
Years ago, David, when NYPD was still considering Genetec, some of the early technical work was done by my colleagues. I'm very familiar both with Genetec as a vendor or a manufacturer, their integrators, this particular project for the LMSI. So that was some time ago. Keep in mind, the difference is that NYPD has quite a few resources and team dedicated to this. What you want to do on your side, you always have to discuss who's going to be monitoring this. What kind of alerts are you expecting? How are they going to be processed? It could be very simple, keep in mind, but you still have to make sure you go through the protocols of you get an alert, what is your set of actions?
Understand that if you get one alert a day, that's really welcome. Yeah. If you're getting an alert every 15 minutes, the system's going to be turned off and made useless.
Correct.
So, the idea of calibration and deciding what you want to know is important. Your picture, I think I see the London.
Yeah, that's London
Underground logo.
Yep. Yes, sir.
And, so it's not done in New York.
Correct. Well, I was trying to be careful. Otherwise, the former members of NYPD might yell at me, who are on our team. So I didn't want to rattle any cages here. We also discuss something that's similar to virtual fencing and motion detection. But in this case in particular, the system is smart enough to identify a human being who's moving around back and forth in a specific smaller zone of the outdoor space. Not for every condition, but these things are useful to see. And we've gotten reports from multiple facilities who said, look, we've had somebody on the property walking around or near our building. They're unfamiliar to us. We don't know what they're doing there. We don't know what their purpose is. What do you think happens when people conduct surveillance? You don't think they loiter? Of course they do. Okay, not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, they will loiter, right? These systems are smart enough to pick up on these things, right? So in this case, you notice the green lines, the kind of the wavy lines that run horizontally inside the red detection zone. This is how this person's been moving around. They've been going from the roll-up gate, past the window, to the wall, to the artist wall, and so on. What's the point of that activity? So somebody can receive an alert, right? And in this case, this is coming from a product that Axis developed not so long ago that basically gives you early warning, right? We talk about early warnings all the time, right? In a lot of our webinars. And so here you have a clear example of how that early warning then gets delivered to the group of users, right? And then you choose what you want to do about it, right? But a lot of surveillance detection can happen this way, okay? Can be very trivial. By the looks of it, this person likely, if you approach them, they'll be like, I just, came out for a smoke. But they may not be associated with the organization at all. So are they telling you the right story, right? So this is how you typically demonstrate if you're acting on these types of incidents early enough. This is how you demonstrate that you're not a soft target, okay? That there will be a response to a threat actor who's trying to survey your facility. That will be a very clear indicator that you're picking up on things, right?
Yeah, think playgrounds.
Yep.
There's a lot of us who have playgrounds on our property, and that's a prime target.
I was just at a couple of facilities in Rockland County. Both have extensive outdoor spaces, playgrounds, and whatever. Would be a very useful detection tool. Now, again, just want to reiterate, please make sure that it's well studied and calibrated if you choose to buy something like this. All right, we've arrived quite smoothly at the Q&A. We still have several minutes to get through questions, hopefully address some of your concerns, any ideas. Yeah, Jamie, please help us through
Yes,
this.
sure. There's two questions. So one is we plan to acquire a PA system in the future, but we will be acquiring a camera system now. What should we ask for when acquiring a camera system to ensure it can integrate with the PA system?
By PA, I suppose you mean public address. So that's slightly different from video analytics. So there are either logical or relay, like basically hardwired integrations between PA systems and video analytics or video surveillance systems. And so what you should be thinking about is when announcements are being made, what kind of video surveillance zones are being triggered based on your direction. So for example, if you're telling people, okay, move to this side of the building, okay? So you want to obviously monitor both the incident area or potential incident area, and you also want to monitor the movement and how the community members are moving towards certain sections of the building. PA systems by design are not sending signal back. Please remember that, okay? So you could have, let's say, a two-way communication system that where a person at one end of the facility picks up the phone and says, I have something going on, right? You could connect that unit, that communication unit with the video surveillance system so that every time that it's engaged, there would be video surveillance in that zone, okay? That's not difficult to set up, okay? And a lot of integrators know how to do it. you need to really think about different scenarios of what you're going to be doing with your public address system and the video surveillance system. It doesn't sound like you'll need tremendous amount of video analytics, and some of the video analytics that come out of the box with traditional video surveillance systems will suffice. But make sure that you talk to the integrators about how you want those two systems to serve you and what kind of scenarios to think about. Right. So I mentioned a few. If there are others, those are the ones you should write down and share with the integrator so that they can give you additional ideas about how to put these two systems together.
Just to understand how to think about a system and think about a scenario. So scenario one is, would require a lockdown. It would be difficult for me to think of a scenario where you would announce a lockdown automatically. You don't want the video system to detect someone, getting within your fence, your virtual fence, and then ordering a lockdown. You want human intervention there because of the proliferation of false alarms and things like that. You want, if a parent is just coming to visit, you don't want to be ordering a lockdown. So you don't want your video system ordering your PA system to do something, usually. Do you want to, for example, have a PA system that's a two-way PA system, which they are available, and it detects someone saying help or a key word, and then you have a camera in that classroom, for example, and the video of that classroom goes to the center of your screen. That may be something that you want to do. It's feasible, but you have to discuss it with the person that's going to be installing your system.
In addition to that question, the same person says we are looking to acquire a camera system. Verkada looks attractive as it does not use an NXP, and Verkada can provide access control and intrusion detection.
You see what I'm doing? Stop
Can
with
you please?
Verkada. Stop with
No.
Verkada.
Okay.
Sorry, Jamie, please continue. I'm sorry for cutting you
No,
off.
no, I understand. So if you are familiar, can you please give us your take on it?
We have multiple reports of Verkada providing what's called a leased system. They will saturate your facility with the cameras, and then they will hold you as a client hostage to that system. Okay? So it's a hostageware, basically. So they have complete control to turn on the cameras if you pay, to turn off the cameras if they see something that you're not paying. It's a very aggressive organization.
They charge you for the cameras.
Yep.
They charge you for all these systems, and then they charge you a license fee to use their systems. If you stop paying the license fee, your cameras become bricks.
Yep.
And they're useless. They have really, they pride themselves. They have really, really excellent salespeople.
Mm-hmm.
And everything seems to integrate because they want you to use all of their systems. We generally, Ilya mentioned that we subscribe, CSI subscribes to IPVM, which is a leading review site in the industry. And they've documented many, many cases. So it's something buyer beware. Ellie and I have similar reactions when we hear the word.
Okay, now keep in mind, there are competitors to Verkada that are actually a lot more ethical, at least in, through public domain research. This is why I've said, time and time again, do your due diligence, understand like what's said publicly in the media about this organization. Verkada has been sued. They've had salespeople suing the company. They've had inappropriate behavior allegations and settlements, and there's all sorts of negativity swirling around Verkada. But the bottom line is you buy the product, and like David said, they have complete control, and you cannot make a move one way or another, and otherwise they will just turn off your system, and the cameras will be sitting there, no signal, no nothing, and it's going to be a negotiation. Why would you want to put yourself in that position? So it's a very locked down system. My recommendation is that you as the client should have full control because you're investing the money. And so nobody should be in a position to turn off your systems. Nobody should be in the position to tell you what to do when you've already acquired that product. It should be completely within your control. If you see that something sinister, like somebody else will have full control of your system after acquisition, run away.
There's a related reminder that I have to give everyone when you're preparing your bids. Actually, when you're preparing your investment justification and you talk about the cost of cameras, all of these systems and these advanced features come with the license. And you have to pay an annual licensing fee. Sometimes, you're charged monthly, sometimes it's once a year, whatever it is, it is. Include that in the cost of the camera on your IJ. Include it in the specs when you put this out for bid. And you can have the grant, which has a 3-year period. The grant will pay 3 years of licenses. For the federal grants, 2 years for the state grants, because the state grants are only 2-year periods. And even if you don't pay with other systems, at least you have a dumb camera. At least you can see what's in the parking lot.
Next question. We're about to put out an RFP for a video surveillance system. We do not have cameras at this moment. We have a system by Ubiquiti that handles our Wi-Fi and can be expanded to include video monitoring and access control. When looking for vendors, how much importance should we give to knowledge of Ubiquiti and integrating with it? It's more important that the vendor has knowledge about security in general.
Well, Ubiquiti sells both the networking stuff and also video surveillance. There's more of a new techie player in the video surveillance market. I would put them together more likely with the Ring cameras that are more like door intercoms, if you will, things like that. I don't know to what extent they really are committed to developing a solid video surveillance product. If you're looking for a video surveillance system that integrates, you certainly should make it a requirement, and an integrator should be aware that you have Ubiquiti on site, and then they will make a proposal to install a system that works together with Ubiquiti. Ubiquiti themselves can tell you what products integrate with their technology, right? So just have those conversations. And yes, it's a good point. You should disclose that you have Ubiquiti on site. I don't know to what extent, but again, you should demonstrate that to the integrators, to the bidders.
Your bid specs, compatibility with Ubiquiti.
Yeah, absolutely. Just make that statement. If it were my choice, I would gravitate toward traditional video surveillance manufacturers for my choices of video surveillance.
And finding potential vendors. How do you recommend finding potential vendors?
If you mean integrators and you're located in our neck of the woods around New York City metro area, considering the products you're looking at, for example, just to give you an idea, I know the regional sales rep for Hanwha. Hanwha is a Korean manufacturer that makes very good video surveillance products, right? You go through the manufacturer and you sometimes write on their website, they will tell you who their dealers are. Okay. And by dealers, I mean integrators, right? So right on their website, there will be a list of regional integrators that know how to install their products, right? And so the same way you could reach out to Eagle Eye, to Genetec, to various other video surveillance providers who already list their integrators in every region of the country. You can also, and this is what we've been saying all along, you can also reach out to peer facilities, to your peer community, and ask other facilities what integrators they've used. And they will likely share with you whether they like the integrator or they didn't like the integrator. So at least you'll start building up some awareness of some integrators that are preferable and some that are not. We know that the ads provide limited value in terms of your sourcing of these integrators, peer community, manufacturer websites, or if you are in touch with manufacturer sales rep, they will also recommend them to you. David, do you have any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, there's one other point that I think could make your lives easier, which is that when you're required, both in the state and the federal grant, to advertise. The advertisements are worthless. We know that, it's just a state requirement. But if you send your advertisements to CSI_questions at CSI-NY.org, we maintain a list, which we don't distribute because we don't recommend anyone, but we maintain a list of vendors who we've heard have given good service to your peer organizations. And we distribute your ad to them too. So you might, if you send your ad to Jamie at CSI_questions, we'll make sure that it gets to another audience. And we're in a very difficult place. We don't want to be recommending vendors because even the most perfect vendors can have a bad day. And on one hand, number two, we don't want anyone to think that we're getting any income from, using a particular vendor. So we try to play the role of Caesar's wife and be beyond reproach. We try to figure out a way that we can widen the net and cast a wider net to vendors. And that's a service that we can give. We don't make any recommendations. It's your decision. We can help you once you get bids back. We can help you kind of sort among the bids and make sure that the bids are apples to apples. Because a lot of times vendors come back and you want this kind of system and they try to sell you whatever they have. So
Yes.
Jamie,
So,
was the source of all goodness here. We'll make sure that gets out.
thank you, David. So that is it with the questions. Thank you, David. Thank you, Ilya. Anything else you want to add?
Jamie, did we respond to everyone?
I am responding to the last question via a chat, and I think we are good to go.
Okay. Lisa said she had a question. Yes. Bids are a request for proposals from vendors. I call bid specs. And by the way, just so everyone knows, we have a webpage. If you just go to the CSI-NY.org webpage, there's a subpage, which is post-grant assistance. And if you go to the post-grant assistance, for example, we have sample bids, number one. Number two, we're doing better every year. In our assessments, we have actual sample specifications. We have a section called recommendation, and those recommendations can easily be turned into bid specifications. And, you send out the bid specifications that you want this kind of system, you want this kind of analytics, and that's what your regional security director is for, is to help you kind of figure out what you need. And if he doesn't have the answer, he can, drag in Dov, drag in Ilya, whatever. Jamie usually gets dragged into this too. They can start answering your questions.
I think that's it for the questions.
If we're done, we're done. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for your time. Thank you very much for contributing to your organizations. We're very grateful. Like I said before, supporting your community is probably one of the most meaningful contributions we're making. So thank you for giving us a chance, for engaging with us. David, any final words?
Stay safe out there and keep people secure.
Perfect. Thank you
Thanks
all.
all. Bye,
Take care.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.